So it's springtime and the flowers are out. We're going to take some time in this video to look more closely at a flower. In fact, we're going to take it apart and see what's inside. So I'm going to pick this flower off of this plant, and we're going to take this flower and have a closer look. So here is the flower that I picked from outside. Let's take apart this flower and look at all the different parts. When we look at the flower like this, we have these beautiful petals that have a beautiful pink color and pink and white. And then there's some smaller leaves that sort of surround the base here. And then there's sort of a stem here. So I want to talk a little bit about what these are called and how things work in terms of the parts of the flower. So this is called the pedicel right here. And this holds the flower up. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to work from the outside, starting here with these small leaves. We're going to work from here inside to the inside of the flower, so we can take a look at the different parts. So these small leaves here that surround it at the bottom, these are called sepals. And sepals protect the delicate inner part of the flower. That's one of their roles. They're also green in color, which means they contain chlorophyll, so they're also manufacturing food for the plant. Now, after the sepals, we get to the very colorful part, and this is the petal. The petals of a flower. And these are actually leaves, but they don't have any chlorophyll in them. Chlorophyll is green, and that's what helps leaves manufacture food and energy for the plant. But these are leaves, but they have other chemicals in them that make them different colors and make them look really interesting to insects, and also give the flower a smell as well. If you look really closely, just like in leaves, there are lines in here, and those are the veins that are inside of the petals. In order to get inside this flower, you can see there's other things on the inside of the flower. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick off these outer parts. So first of all, I'm going to pick off the sepals. So there's one and two, three. You can do this too if you find a flower. 4, whoops, they're kind of sticky. 5. And I can use my fingers if I want to, but I'm using tweezers just because it makes it a little bit more exact. Now I'm going to pick off the petals of the flower. Now this flower, the petals are connected. Many flowers have separate petals. So with this one, I'm going to sort of tear the petal and pull it back so we can see the inside of the flower. And this is another reason why I am using these tweezers, because it gives me a more exact way of getting in here without damaging other things. So I might go like this. So I've taken the petals off and the sepals, and now we can see the inside of this flower. Now, some flowers, these are larger, some are smaller, so this might not be really clear to see because they're so small. But I wanted to point out some other things that are inside this flower. And I'd be interested to know, if you take apart a flower, do you see these things inside the flower that you've taken apart? When you take off the sepals and the petals, like I just did, you'll see inside there's usually a single long piece in the very center that sticks up above with a big flat piece at the top. And then there's these other smaller, there's a number of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of these other ones. So let's start with these parts here, these parts that are surrounding the center part, because we're going to work from the outside in. This part here, there's 4 of them. They're called stamens. The stamen is the male part of the flower. And the stamen, there's two parts to it. At the very end of this stamen, there's a thing called the anther, and that holds the pollen. It makes and holds the pollen of the flower. And the anther is held up by these long wire-like things that they're called filaments, and that holds the anther up. Okay? So that's the male part of the flower, and it has the pollen. Now, if we peel those back and we look at the very center of the flower, like I was saying before, at the very center of the flower is this long structure here. This is called the pistil. And the pistil is the female part of the flower. It's got this big part at the end here, big compared to the rest of it here. This is called the stigma at the very end. And the stigma is very, very sticky. And what happens is, and we'll talk about this in a second, but when pollen from this flower or other flowers hits it, comes into it, then the stigma will be very sticky and it will sort of hold on to that pollen from another flower. And that's why it sticks up like that. Underneath the stigma here, this long green thing, that's called the style. And it's actually a pipe. It's a pipe that goes down into this bottom part of the flower here. This is called the ovary. Okay, you can see it right here. If I put this down, it sort of looks, you can see it just there at the bottom. It's hard to see. And that's the third part of the pistil. So there's the stigma at the top, the style, which is this pipe, and then there's the ovary at the bottom. So this is the ovary here, and the ovary contains the eggs of the flower. So when the pollen from this flower or other flowers gets stuck onto the stigma, it makes its way down, that pollen makes its way down the style and that tube, goes down to the ovary, and it fertilizes the eggs, and then that's what will become a seed, which will be the beginnings, hopefully, of a new plant and a new flower and a whole new cycle of the plant growth again. That is what the inside of a flower looks like, and I'd be curious to know, if you look inside a flower, what do you find? Does it look the same as this, or does it look different? Now I took apart a flower, a large flower, but if you don't have flowers like that around your home, you might have dandelions like I do growing in my grass. So dandelions, of course, are flowers, but dandelions are actually very, very complex flowers. A dandelion is not one flower at all. It's actually hundreds of flowers growing together, and they form this part here called a head. So it's surrounded by these green scales, and just inside there, inside the green scales, you will find the sepals that are protecting the flower. And the reason why I didn't take apart a dandelion first was because it's extremely hard to see, because the parts of the dandelion that I want to talk about, the stamen, which is the male part, and the pistil, which is the female part, they're very, very tiny. And usually you need a microscope or a very strong magnifying glass to see them. But if you pick up a dandelion, these outer yellow petals, remember, those are hundreds of little flowers. Each one is almost its own flower. And then inside, you'll see tiny little parts on the inside. They look like tiny little stems that curl left and right. So actually, if you look really close on them, there's an anther sort of below, and growing up right through the middle, out at the top, is the pistil with the stigma at the top, and the stigma at the top grows out each way back and forth, and it's the sticky part, and it holds on to the pollen. So there are many, many of these little structures in here, of the anthers and pistils, lots and lots and lots of them. And that's what makes a dandelion so successful as a plant and a flower, because bugs, when they come in to sort of drink some of the nectar of the flower, can cross-pollinate. They can take some of the pollen from one dandelion to another, or with the wind and movement of the air, a dandelion can self-pollinate, and therefore it completes its life cycle on its own, and then can create the seeds that fly off and that you see. So here is a dandelion that I found where that's happened, and you can see that the sepals have closed up to protect it. But if we open this up, and you can do this too, before it opens up into like a big puff ball, each one of these will become one of those seeds that you can blow off, or the wind will blow off. And when I pull these out, I'm going to pull a whole bunch of them out. There we go. So there's a whole bunch of them there. So this is why dandelions are so successful as a plant. Each one of these green bits at the end here is a seed for a new dandelion plant. There you go. So there's the part that the wind's going to catch. This will expand outward as the dandelion reopens, and it'll become this ball of white, and these very fine hairs get caught in the wind, and eventually the wind will take all of these seeds and spread them around, and when they land in soil, they will eventually germinate. Look how many seeds are inside this one dandelion. I haven't even pulled them all out. I'm going to pull some more out. There's some more. This is one single dandelion flower. Look at the seeds. No wonder there's so many dandelions around. It's amazing. So here's another one that I found, a dandelion, and this is the stage before it opens up and looks like this. Before it opens up with all of the hundreds of little flowers. And I think I showed this in another video a little bit, but you might be able to find this. And usually this is this part here, the pedestal, is still growing. It's still sort of trying to push the dandelion up in the air. Okay, so you can see here that there are no seeds because this flower has not been pollinated yet. The pollen has not been stuck onto the stigma, and it's not headed down to the ovary, and it's not become a seed yet. But these grow everywhere, and so you can find these and pull these apart and have a look and see what's inside of them. Dandelions are amazingly complex and successful flowers. A lot of people don't like them. They call them weeds. They pull them out of their grass. I do that too. But I have to say that I do respect the dandelion. It's a very, very successful plant.